Right, so I'm going to come and sit on the floor. It all gets very interesting now, doesn't it? If I sit on the floor like this, how's that? That works, doesn't it? Yay! Right, we've got a system. I'm going to show you, let me find the beginning of my round. This is my field study cardigan that I'm knitting here, and this is the sleeve in my field study cardigan. And I don't know if you can see where there are some increases. There's one somewhere around there. And I use lifted increases in Colourwork. Now I want to show you the standard method of doing a lifted increase. And then I want to show you what I actually do. Because, thank you very much, Barbara. I'm going to show you what I actually do. Because, can you see I've got a knitting thimble on? This is my cheat. I'm cheating because I'm having to knit right-handed, and demonstrating an increase technique in right-handed stranded Colourwork, I decided that just for today I wasn't willing to do two-handed stranded method, having to hold a yarn in my right hand and try and do the whole lever action with my right hand, while actually I am a left-handed person. I find that too difficult. Well, not too difficult, I can do it, I just thought it wouldn't look great for you lot today. So here we are, I'm ready to knit this next stitch. So I thought, let's demonstrate a lifted increase before first, the standard technique. And is this clear enough? Let me see if I can get it in camera. Can you see that there? Is that, I hope that's clear enough, and that there's enough light for it to show. The side of this stitch, great, thank you, that's great to know, thank you. The side of this stitch, the next stitch on the needle, the stitch below the stitch that's sitting on the needle, we're going to work the increase into that stitch that's below the stitch on the needle. And what we do is we pick up the side of that stitch which is nearest to the point of the needle. This is a lifted increase before, because we're going to work the increase into the stitch below the stitch on the needle before we work the stitch on the needle. So it's a lifted increase before, because we're working the increase before working the stitch in the stitch column in which the increase is occurring. So we lift up the nearest side of that stitch with the working needle, and we lift it onto the needle like that in front of the stitch that it was below, and then we knit it, just knit it in the ordinary manner, entering it through the front the way that you would any stitch. It's going to look awkward because of the way it sits next to the stitch, but that's the way it is. And then those of you who are continental knitters will recognise exactly what I'm doing here. I'm just picking up a yarn. Now it can be either of the yarns, it doesn't matter what colour. I work it in the colour that the chart tells me to work it. I'm not worrying about that today though, I'm just showing the techniques. I'll be ripping all this out later today so that I can actually go back to knitting left-handed. I've had to reverse the mount on all these stitches so that I can show you right-handed. I'll be putting everything back to rights again so I can carry on actually knitting my sleeve. So there we've worked the increase, and then we knit the stitch. We'll pretend I've got to knit the stitch with the darker colour there, the contrast colour. Right, so can you see there, those two stitches? Now that one there is the increase. And it's quite a neat technique, apart from I found quite often that it pulls the stitch so wide open that things can get to look quite holy where the increase is, which I'd prefer not to happen. So I've developed this technique a bit. So this, what I'm about to show you, is not standard. We'll work another lifted increase before. So we pick up the side of the stitch nearest to the needle, and we put it, instead of putting it straight on like that, I'm going to put it on backwards. So I'm inserting the passive needle into that loop I've picked up from behind, so that it's on there backwards, and then I knit the stitch. And can you see that that's made that side of that loop twist below my new stitch, so that it's twisted and that twist, it tends to close the stitch below it now. And then I'll knit the next stitch. I'll knit it with the darker contrast colour. Can you see the difference there between those stitches now? That this one I've just knitted, it's got a little pip in front of it. But that tends to disappear, I find, once I've knitted the next few rounds. And the increases to me, done that way, a lifted increase before, I find that creates a neater result in my finished project. So that's what I like to do. Would you like me to do that again, to show you again? Brilliant, thank you very much. I like to be thought of as brilliant. There's nothing like being admired, is there? Right, so I will pick up the nearest side of this next stitch and passive needle entering the loop from behind, and then I knit the stitch and worked that way. It makes this loop twist below it, and then I'll knit the next stitch as well, the actual stitch as well. So we've got several increases going on there. Let's have a look at a lifted increase after. So we work a lifted increase, you've guessed it, after we've worked the stitch below which we are going to use a stitch to increase. So I've now knitted a stitch. Now, because we've already, we're doing this on the same level, because we're working into the stitch after we've worked it, we actually, rather than knitting into this stitch below, that's the one that we've only just knitted, we're going to go a row below yet again. So I'm taking my passive needle this time to pick up, let's move better into camera view there, to pick up the nearest side of the stitch that's actually 2 rounds below. There it is on my passive needle, and now I want to flip that round to be I could just knit it like that, but what I've discovered is that the way that the twist lies, if I just knit straight into it there, I don't like the way the twist lies if I do it like that. So instead, this time it's my working needle that I'm going to take into that loop from behind to twist it round. So there I've reversed the mount, and now I'm working it. It's what you'll experience as a backwards knit, because I'm working it as though I'm doing a what am I doing? I want to twist to go into that like it's a backwards knit to bring it back to the needle there, and now I'm going to knit it. And let's see, I'm going to do that again to show you. Can you see there the twisted loop? The effect is as though the way that this works, the stitches that I've increased, it's as though I've done a knit front and back 2 rows below. Effectively, that's what the result ends up being. Doing this little twist makes it as though I've done a knit front and back 2 rows below, or a knit back then front 2 rows below. Let me just tighten my yarn a bit. Right, so I'm going to go and I think we need to pick up some of this contrast colour yarn. Here we go. Knit a stitch, and again we'll do a lifted increase after. So I'm taking the needle point into the nearest side of the stitch 2 rows below the stitch I've just knitted, and I want to turn that stitch around. So working needle into it from behind to twist it, return it to the passive needle, taking the passive needle through it from the right hand side, isn't it, that I'm entering it, so as to make sure that it's properly twisted for working, and then I'm going to enter it and knit it. And I've decided to use some of this the contrast colour yarn, haven't I, because my tension was getting all uneven. There we go. So I've now worked 2 lifted increases after. So I think I've shown you at least 2 lifted increases before and 2 lifted increases after, with this twist below them that I like to do. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions? Is there anybody that wants me to show that again? what I propose doing, having done this broadcast, is that I will go and in private, not during a Periscope broadcast, but in private, I will do a tutorial for this. I'll film myself doing it left-handed and flip the video, which is how I do most of my tutorials, because I do knit much more efficiently when I knit left-handed. That is in the opposite direction to everybody else, because I am a left-handed person. Was that clear enough? Anyone want to ask any questions, pass any comments? I'll just say again, if there's anybody watching who... That was clear. Thank you, Barbara. That's very reassuring for me. Because I was doing it, it was difficult to know whether it was in camera view all the time. Yeah, that was... Oh, thank you, Jackie. That's really great feedback. Wonderful. Right, shall I just... I'm just going to take all this off and I'll go back to my chair, having finished, and turn the camera around so I can talk to you again. Just excuse me while my arthritic knees cope with me standing up again. Here we go. Oh, I've just ordered